My name is Sarah Chin, and at 24, I had built something revolutionary, a piece of software that could transform how hospitals manage patient care. But to my parents, I was just their naive daughter who needed to get a real job. I still remember the day everything changed. I was hunched over my laptop in my tiny apartment, debugging a crucial section of code when my phone buzzed. Mom's face flashed on the screen. "Sarah, we need to talk about your little computer project," she said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of disapproval. "Michael Anderson is interested in buying it." Michael Anderson. The name made my stomach turn. He was the son of my father's best friend, a self-proclaimed tech entrepreneur who had never actually built anything himself. But in my parents' eyes, he was the perfect success story. MBA from an elite school, connections in Silicon Valley, and most importantly, he was a man who understood business. "Mom, it's not for sale," I said firmly. "The software is almost ready for the pilot program. 3 hospitals have already." "Don't be difficult, Sarah," she cut me off. "You're just a girl playing with computers. Michael has real business experience. He can turn this into something legitimate." My fingers tightened around the phone. Just a girl. Those 3 words had followed me my entire life. When I taught myself coding at 12, it was just a phase. When I graduated top of my class in computer science, it was cute. When I started developing healthcare management software, working 18-hour days and living on ramen noodles, it was a waste of time. "The software is mine," I said. "I'm not selling." But my parents had other plans. The next day, they invited me to dinner. I should have known something was wrong when I saw Michael there, wearing his practiced Silicon Valley smile. My father sat at the head of the table, beaming with pride. Not at me, but at him. "Sarah," my father said, placing a check on the table. "We decided to sell your project to Michael. He's offering $500, which is generous considering it's unfinished." I stared at the check, then at my father, waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one. "You can't sell my company," I said, my voice shaking. "You don't own it." Michael leaned forward, his smile never wavering. "Sarah, be reasonable. Your father told me about your little program. It's a good start, but you need someone with real experience to make it marketable, someone who understands the business world." I looked at my mother, hoping for support, but she just nodded approvingly at Michael. "He's right, dear. This is for the best." What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that my little program was already worth millions. The algorithm I developed could reduce hospital wait times by 47%, predict patient admission patterns with 93% accuracy, and cut administrative costs by a third. 3 major hospitals were ready to begin trials, and a leading healthcare tech company had already offered to partner with me. But none of that mattered to them, because I was just a girl playing with computers. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "The software isn't yours to sell. I own the patents. I own the company, and I'm not signing anything." My father's face darkened. "Sarah, stop being childish. Michael is willing to give you a job at the company, a real job with benefits. You should be grateful." Grateful. The word hit me like a slap. I should be grateful that someone was trying to steal my life's work for pocket change. "Keep your check," I said, turning to leave. "And Michael? Good luck trying to steal my company. You'll need it." But I underestimated how far they would go. The next morning, I discovered my parents had used their shared access to my old laptop, the one where I'd stored my earliest code versions, to copy everything. They'd given Michael all my original work, claiming they had the right because they'd supported me by letting me live at home while I started coding. Michael wasted no time. Within days, he'd registered a new company, claiming ownership of my software. He even used my early design documents to file provisional patents, backdating them using my parents' signatures as witnesses. I watched in horror as he announced his new healthcare tech venture, using my work, my ideas, my dreams. The local tech blogs praised him as a rising star in healthcare innovation. My parents couldn't have been prouder. But Michael had made one crucial mistake. He hadn't bothered to understand the code he'd stolen. You see, while my parents had access to my old laptop, my real work, the revolutionary algorithms, the proprietary architecture, the core innovation that made everything work, was safely stored elsewhere. What Michael had stolen was just the skeleton, the basic framework. Without the heart of the system, it was useless. I spent the next week documenting everything. Every line of code I'd written, every meeting with hospitals, every email, every patent application. I backed up everything securely and contacted Sarah Martinez, a ruthless intellectual property lawyer known for taking down tech frauds. "They really thought they could steal your company for $500? She asked during our first meeting, looking through my documentation with growing interest. "They thought I was just a girl playing with computers," I replied. She looked up from the papers, a predatory smile spreading across her face. "Well then, let's show them exactly what just a girl can do." I didn't know it then, but that meeting would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the tech world. Michael was about to learn the hard way that real innovation doesn't come from stealing other people's work. It comes from understanding every line of code you write. And I understood every single line. The next phase of my story began with a simple error message, one that would make Michael Anderson realize he just made the biggest mistake of his career. 2 weeks after Michael stole my code, I received an urgent text from an old college friend who now worked at Central Hospital, one of the facilities planning to pilot my software. "Sarah, you need to see this. Anderson Tech just crashed and burned during their demo." I smiled, knowing exactly what had happened. You see, my code had a failsafe, a sophisticated authentication system that required my personal verification for any major system implementation. Without it, the software would appear to work perfectly during small tests, but would fail spectacularly when deployed at scale. Michael had scheduled a grand demonstration at Central Hospital, inviting the press, investors, and of course, my parents. He planned to showcase his revolutionary healthcare management system to the world. I sat in the back of the conference room, wearing glasses and a business suit that made me unrecognizable to my family. The room was packed with hospital administrators, tech journalists, and potential investors. Michael stood on stage, looking confident in his expensive suit. "Today," he'd announced, "Anderson Tech will revolutionize healthcare management." That's when everything went wrong. The system started throwing error messages, not simple crashes. No, my failsafe was more elegant than that. Instead, the software began displaying its true validation requirements. Error: core algorithm authentication required. Original developer verification needed. Michael's face went pale as he frantically tried to bypass the error, but with each attempt, the system revealed more about its true ownership. Warning: unauthorized implementation detected. Please contact S. Chen for system validation. The room erupted in whispers. Investors began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Hospital administrators exchanged concerned glances. I watched my parents' expressions change from pride to confusion as Michael stumbled through increasingly desperate explanations. Then I stood up and walked to the front of the room. "Mr. Anderson," I said clearly, my voice carrying through the now silent auditorium, "are you having trouble with my software?" The look of confusion on his face quickly turned to horror as I removed my glasses. "Perhaps I can help. After all, I wrote every line of that code." "Sarah?" My father stood up, his face a mix of shock and anger. "What are you doing?" I pulled out my laptop, connected it to the projector, and began typing. "I'm demonstrating who really created this software." With a few keystrokes, I authenticated the system. The error messages disappeared, replaced by the fully functioning platform I'd spent years developing. The room watched in awe as I showed them what the software could really do, not just basic patient management, but predictive analytics, resource optimization, and real-time decision support. "This is the actual system," I explained to the stunned audience. "The one Mr. Anderson tried to steal for $500. I projected emails, patent documentation, and development logs onto the screen, evidence that proved I was the true creator. And here's something interesting," I added, pulling up a final document, a cease and desist letter from my lawyer, along with a federal lawsuit for intellectual property theft. Michael lunged for the podium. "She's lying. Her parents signed over the rights to me." Sarah Martinez, my lawyer, stood up from her seat in the front row. "Actually, they didn't have any rights to sign over. Ms. Chen's patents and code were fully registered before you attempted to steal them. Would you like to explain to everyone here how you obtained her intellectual property?" The room erupted in chaos. Investors stormed out, pulling out phones to cancel their commitments. Hospital administrators huddled together, whispering about legal implications. Journalists started firing questions at Michael, who stood frozen on stage. My mother grabbed my arm. "Sarah, how could you do this? Michael was trying to help you." I gently removed her hand. "No, Mom. He was trying to steal from me, and you helped him because you never believed in me." But we were just looking out for you," my father stuttered. "You're just a girl?" I finished for him. "This just a girl built a system worth millions. The same system your friend's son tried to steal for the price of a cheap phone." I turned to the remaining audience members. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm the founder and CEO of Careflow Technologies, and I'm looking forward to showing you what my software can really do, legally and under my leadership." The aftermath was swift and devastating for Michael. His investors pulled out, his reputation in the tech world was destroyed, and he faced serious legal consequences for intellectual property theft. My parents? They tried to backtrack, claiming they were just trying to protect me. But the trust was broken. How could I ever believe in their support when they'd so easily dismissed everything I built? 6 months later, I stood on the same stage, but under very different circumstances. Careflow Technologies had just closed a $50 million funding round. Our pilot programs were showing incredible results: 50% reduction in wait times, 40% improvement in resource allocation, and unprecedented accuracy in patient care management. As I announced our success to a packed auditorium, I spotted my parents in the back row. They'd been trying to reconcile, sending messages about how proud they were, how they'd always believed in me. But their words rang hollow. They were proud now because I'd succeeded despite them, not because they'd supported me. After the presentation, they approached me, eyes filled with guilt and regret. "Sarah, honey," my mother began, "we're so sorry. We never meant to." I held up my hand. "I know you're sorry, but being sorry because I succeeded isn't the same as believing in me when I was struggling. Can't we move past this?" my father pleaded. "We're family." I looked at them thoughtfully. Family is supposed to support each other, not steal from each other. You chose to help Michael steal my work because you couldn't imagine your daughter being capable of real success. I handed them each a business card. "If you want to see me, you can schedule a meeting through my office, just like any other business associate." As I walked away, I heard my mother burst into tears. Part of me wanted to turn back, to accept their apology and pretend everything could go back to normal. But I knew better. Sometimes success isn't just about proving others wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right all along. Today, Careflow Technologies is revolutionizing healthcare management across the country. We're expanding internationally, and our valuation has reached over $200 million. Michael Anderson, he's banned from the tech industry, his reputation in shambles. And that $500 check they tried to buy my company with? I had it framed. It hangs in my office as a reminder that your worth isn't determined by what others think of you, but by what you know you can achieve. Sometimes people will underestimate you, dismiss you, or try to steal your dreams. But if you believe in yourself and protect what you've built, success is the best revenge. The next time someone tells you were just a girl or just anything else, remember my story. Remember that the people who underestimate you don't define your worth. You do. As for my parents, they still send emails sometimes talking about family and forgiveness. Maybe one day we'll rebuild our relationship, but it will have to be on new terms, not as the daughter they thought they could dismiss, but as the woman who proved them wrong. Because I'm not just a girl playing with computers anymore. I'm the founder and CEO who changed the future of healthcare technology, and no one can take that away from me. I sat at the elegant dining table in my parents' home, watching my sister Diana hold court like she always did. Her wine glass waved dangerously as she gestured, telling yet another story about her latest business triumph. The acquisition was worth $50 million, she announced, preening under our parents' adoring gazes. Sterling Tech is now the fastest-growing software company in the state. My name is Meera Patel, and I've spent the last 5 years being the family disappointment. At least that's what they think I am. And what about you, Meera? Diana turned her attention to me, lips curving in that familiar condescending smile. Still working on that little startup of yours? What was it called again? Shadow something. Shadowbox Digital. I replied quietly, taking a sip of water. No wine for me tonight. I need a clear head for tomorrow's meetings. Right. Diana waved her hand dismissively. Doing websites for small businesses, isn't it? How? Quaint. Our mother jumped in, ever the peacekeeper. Not everyone can run a company like Sterling Tech, dear. Mira is doing her best with what she has. If they only knew what Shadowbox Digital really was. Behind the modest website and small downtown office that my family occasionally drove past, my tiny startup was actually one of the most innovative cybersecurity firms in the country. Our client list included government agencies, multinational corporations, and yes, several companies larger than Sterling Tech. But Diana had always been the star. Perfect grades, prestigious MBA, meteoric rise through the tech industry. When she founded Sterling Tech 6 years ago, our parents remortgaged their house to provide her seed funding. They never even asked what I was working on. I read about Sterling's new security platform, our father said proudly. Absolutely revolutionary. Diana, you're changing the entire industry. I bit back a smile, thinking about the security flaws our team had discovered in Sterling's platform just last week. Diana had dismissed our private warning sent through intermediaries, of course. Some tiny consulting firm couldn't possibly understand her sophisticated technology. Speaking of changing the industry, Diana continued, we're announcing a major merger tomorrow. One of the biggest deals in the state's history. She smiled smugly in my direction. But I'm sure you understand the importance of confidentiality agreements, Mira. Oh wait, your little web design company probably doesn't deal with those. My phone buzzed quietly in my lap. A message from my COO. Everything's set for tomorrow. Their board has approved the terms. Should I send the final paperwork to their lawyers? What was that, dear? My mother asked, noticing my distraction. Just a client emergency, I said. Small business websites, you know how it is. Diana laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. Oh, I remember those days. Staying up late, worrying about tiny projects. But that's the difference between us, isn't it? I always aimed higher. I typed a quick response. Send everything. Meeting at 9 a.m. The truth about Shadowbox Digital was known to very few people. On paper, we were a small web development firm. In reality, we were a cybersecurity powerhouse operating through a complex network of shell companies and subsidiaries. Our real headquarters occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, employing over 200 of the best programmers and security experts in the business. More importantly, we had spent the last year quietly acquiring shares in Sterling Tech through various front companies. Diana's revolutionary security platform was built on fundamental flaws that would soon become very public. Her company's value was about to plummet unless someone stepped in to save it. That someone was Shadowbox Digital. Another glass, Diana? Our mother offered, reaching for the wine bottle. Why not? Diana beamed. We should celebrate success when we see it. Speaking of which, Mira, if you ever want some advice on growing your business, I'd be happy to help. Sterling's smallest division probably handles more money than your entire company. I checked my phone again. Our latest valuation had just come in, $2.3 billion. Sterling Tech's entire market cap was less than half that. That's kind of you, I said mildly. Actually, I do have some meetings about expansion tomorrow. Oh. Diana's eyebrows rose with exaggerated interest. Finally moving to a bigger office, maybe hiring a second employee. Our father chuckled. Now, Diana, be nice. Not everyone can be as successful as you. I thought about the stack of documents waiting in my real office, merger agreements, board approvals, and most satisfyingly, the papers that would make me Diana's boss. By this time tomorrow, Sterling Tech would be a subsidiary of Shadowbox Digital. You're right, I said, standing up. I should probably get home. Big day tomorrow. Diana raised her glass in a mock toast to small victories and modest ambitions. As I drove home, I thought about the moment 5 years ago when I decided to keep Shadowbox's true nature a secret from my family. It was at another dinner, just after Diana had launched Sterling Tech. She had spent the entire evening talking about her vision, her brilliance, her destiny to dominate the industry. I had tried to discuss my own plans for an innovative approach to cybersecurity. Diana had cut me off mid-sentence. Oh honey, she'd said, patting my hand. Security tech is so complex. Why don't you stick to something simple, like building websites? Know your limitations. So I did exactly what she suggested. On the surface, I created a small web development firm as Shadowbox's public face. I took an office in a modest building, hired a few local developers to maintain the facade. And behind the scenes, I built something far bigger than Diana could imagine. My phone buzzed again as I pulled into my garage. Another message from my COO. Final confirmation from their board. They have no idea who's really buying them. You should see their org chart for the merged company. They have you listed as reporting to Diana. I smiled, thinking of tomorrow's meeting. Diana's face when she realized that her tiny startup sister was about to become her boss would be priceless. Sometimes the best revenge isn't proving people wrong. It's letting them think they're right until the perfect moment to show them just how wrong they've been. The next morning, I stood in my real office, 40 floors above the city. The small web design office my family knew about was visible from here, a perfect metaphor for how they had always underestimated me. Ready? My COO, James, appeared at my door. Sterling's executive team just arrived. They're in the main conference room. I smoothed my designer suit, a far cry from the casual attire I wore to family dinners. Is Diana here yet? Just walked in. You should see her face trying to figure out why the merger meeting is being held at a company she's never heard of. I smiled, picking up my tablet. The last 5 years had been building to this moment. When I entered the conference room, Diana was standing at the window, her back to the door. She turned, recognition and confusion flooding her face. Mira, what are you doing here? This is a private meeting. I walked to the head of the table, setting down my tablet. Actually, I called this meeting. Diana laughed, but it sounded forced. Don't be ridiculous. I'm here to meet with the CEO of Atlas Dynamics. Atlas Dynamics was one of Shadowbox's many shell companies, the one we used to negotiate the merger. Atlas Dynamics is a subsidiary of Shadowbox Digital, I said calmly, nodding to James to start the presentation. My company. The room fell silent. Diana's face went through a rapid series of emotions: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror. That's impossible, she finally managed. Shadowbox is a tiny web design company. You build websites for restaurants. That's our public face, I agreed. But perhaps you should have looked more closely at who's been acquiring Sterling Tech shares over the past year, or who sent you that security audit warning last month, the one you dismissed because it came from a tiny consulting firm. Diana's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the polished floor. No. I clicked through to the first slide, displaying Shadowbox's true organizational structure. Shadowbox Digital is the parent company of 7 technology firms, including Atlas Dynamics. We specialize in advanced cybersecurity solutions, with a current market valuation of $2.3 billion. The Sterling Tech board members were shuffling through their papers, whispering among themselves. Diana remained frozen, staring at the org chart. As of this morning, I continued, we own 51% of Sterling Tech's shares. This meeting isn't to negotiate a merger, it's to announce one. You can't do this, Diana whispered. Actually, I can. Your board has already approved the deal. They were quite eager to accept our offer, especially after we demonstrated the critical security flaws in your new platform. Diana's face flushed red. Those warnings came from you? We tried to tell you privately. You chose not to listen. I turned to address the broader room. Sterling Tech will become a division of Shadowbox Digital. We'll fix the security issues, integrate the salvageable technology, and restructure the management team. Restructure. Diana's voice cracked. I'm the CEO. Not anymore. I slid a document across the table. Your resignation letter is already prepared. Don't worry, your golden parachute is quite generous. The next hour was a blur of signatures, legal requirements, and shocked silence. Diana sat in her chair, seemingly unable to process what was happening. Finally, as the board members filed out, she turned to me. Why, she asked. Why go to all this trouble? Why pretend to be small? I sat on the edge of the conference table. Do you remember 5 years ago when you told me to know my limitations? You, Mom, Dad, you all decided what I was capable of without ever bothering to find out what I was actually doing. So this is revenge. No, I corrected her. This is business. Sterling Tech is a good acquisition for us, despite its flaws. The fact that it happens to be deeply satisfying is just a bonus. My phone buzzed. A message from our mother. Diana just called in tears. What's going on? What have you done? I showed the message to Diana. They still think you're the successful one. Should we go tell them together? The family dinner that night was very different from the previous one. I sat at the same table, but now Diana was the quiet one, pushing food around her plate. I don't understand, our father kept saying. How could Shadowbox be worth billions? You work in that tiny office downtown. That's just for local web design clients, I explained. Our real headquarters is the Hamilton Tower. You can see my office from here. Top 10 floors, north side. Our mother reached for her wine glass with trembling hands. But Diana, Sterling Tech, will be well taken care of as part of Shadowbox, I assured her. Though Diana has chosen to step down as CEO. Stepping down is a polite way to put it, Diana muttered. You could have warned us, our father said accusingly. All these years pretending to run a small business. I raised an eyebrow. Would you have believed me? You never bothered to ask about my work, except to compare it unfavorably to Diana's. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. Years of assumptions, dismissals, and condescension hung in the air between us. Finally, Diana spoke. I underestimated you. We all did. Yes, I agreed. You did. In the months that followed, Sterling Tech was integrated into Shadowbox. The security flaws were fixed, the technology improved, and the company flourished under new management. Diana took a job with a smaller tech firm, hopefully having learned something about humility. Our parents stopped comparing us, though they still struggled to understand how their underachieving daughter built a billion-dollar company right under their noses. As for me, I kept the small web design office downtown. It serves as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that sometimes the best success is the kind no one sees coming. Occasionally, I drive past it on my way to my real office, remembering Diana's words. Such a tiny startup. I smile every time, because sometimes the best response to being underestimated isn't to prove people wrong. It's to let them keep believing they're right until the perfect moment to show them just how wrong they've been. These days, when people ask about my path to success, I tell them the truth. Sometimes the biggest achievements start with a small facade and a lot of patience. And sometimes the sweetest victory isn't in proving others wrong, but in watching them realize how wrong they've been all along. My name is Olivia Winters, and I've spent the last decade being invisible. Not literally, of course, but in the way that truly matters to my family, success, power, and most importantly, money. The irony? I'm worth more than all of them combined. They just don't know it yet. I stood in front of the mirror in my modest apartment, adjusting my simple black blazer. Nothing designer, nothing flashy. Exactly the image I carefully cultivated. My phone buzzed with another message from my mother. Darling, please come to the celebration dinner tonight. Your brother's promotion is such wonderful news for the family. Marcus, my older brother, had just been named CEO of Winters International, our family's technology company. The golden child had finally ascended to his throne. I typed back a polite acceptance, knowing exactly how the evening would play out. The restaurant was exactly what I expected, overpriced, pretentious, and dripping with old money. The kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you can't afford it. My family was already seated at the prime table, champagne flowing freely. Olivia, my mother called out, her voice carrying that familiar note of carefully masked disappointment. We weren't sure you'd come. You're so busy with your investments. The way she said investments made it sound like I was running a lemonade stand. If only she knew that my small investment company, Shadow Valley Partners, controlled nearly 60% of Winters International through a complex web of shell corporations and silent partnerships. Marcus stood up, resplendent in his custom suit, his new Patek Philippe watch glinting under the chandelier lights. Little sister, finally decided to join the real business world. I could always use someone to handle the coffee runs at that office. Our father chuckled, raising his glass. Now, Marcus, I'm sure Olivia's doing fine with her little venture. Though he turned to me, his eyes sharp, you could have had a real career at Winters. We offered you a position straight out of business school. I smiled, taking a sip of water. Yes, as Marcus's assistant. I preferred to make my own way. And what a way it is, Marcus smirked. Still working out of that tiny office downtown. Well, I'm about to sign the biggest deal in Winters history, $50 million merger with Tech Solutions. But you wouldn't understand the complexities of such things. If he only knew that Tech Solutions was one of my holdings acquired specifically for this moment. Congratulations, Marcus. That sounds like quite the achievement. My mother beamed at him. Marcus has always had such a head for business. Remember when he was just 10 and started that little baseball card trading venture? You mean when he took my rare Mickey Mantle card and sold it without my permission? I asked quietly. Oh, darling, that was ages ago. You need to let these things go. My mother waved her hand dismissively. Look at him now, CEO at 35. While you're still, she trailed off, unable to even describe what I did. The evening continued in this vein, a steady stream of praise from Marcus interspersed with subtle digs at my life choices. I sat quietly, picking at my overcooked salmon, letting their words wash over me. Tomorrow would change everything, but tonight I would let them have their moment. As dessert arrived, Marcus launched into another story about his brilliant business acumen. The Tech Solutions deal is just the beginning. Once we acquire them, Winters International will dominate the market. The board meeting tomorrow is just a formality. I checked my phone, hiding a smile at the email that had just arrived. My team had finished the final preparations. Tomorrow's board meeting would be anything but a formality. Speaking of the merger, my father interjected, I heard a rumor that some mystery investor has been buying up shares through various shell companies. Should we be concerned? Marcus laughed, adjusting his Italian silk tie. Please, Dad. I've got everything under control. This deal is bulletproof. By this time tomorrow, Tech Solutions will be ours, and Winters International will be unstoppable. I excused myself early, citing a morning meeting. As I stood to leave, Marcus called out, Hey sis, maybe once this deal goes through, I can throw some consulting work your way. Help you get a real business going. That's thoughtful of you, Marcus, I replied, gathering my non-designer purse. Actually, I do have a meeting tomorrow. Something about a major company acquisition. Oh, my mother perked up, finally showing interest in my work. What company? I smiled. You'll find out soon enough. That night, in my home office, which was decidedly larger and more impressive than the small downtown space my family knew about, I reviewed the documents one final time. Years of careful planning had led to this moment. My phone rang. It was David, my head of legal. Everything's set for tomorrow, Olivia. The share transfers have been confirmed, and all the paperwork is in order. Are you sure you want to do this? It's going to be quite a shock for them. I looked at the family photo on my desk, taken 15 years ago at my business school graduation. I was standing slightly apart from the others, Marcus front and center, already being groomed for leadership. That was the day they offered me the assistant position, the day I decided to forge my own path. Yes, I'm sure, I replied. It's time they learned that success doesn't always wear a designer label. I hung up and walked to my window, looking out over the city lights. Tomorrow Marcus would walk into that boardroom expecting to sign his triumphant merger deal. Instead, he'd find out that his little sister owned not only Tech Solutions, but the majority of Winters International itself. Tomorrow, being invisible would finally pay off. The next morning, I stood in my private elevator ascending to the top floor of Shadow Valley Partners' real headquarters. The building, a gleaming tower of glass and steel, was actually twice as tall as Winters International's offices, not that my family had ever noticed. Good morning, Ms. Winters, my assistant Michael greeted me. The Winters International team arrived 10 minutes ago. Your brother seems impatient. I smiled, adjusting my custom-tailored Armani suit, an outfit my family would never see me wear. How many times has he mentioned being CEO? 7, and counting. He's also threatened to fire 3 of our receptionists. Perfect. I checked my reflection in the polished elevator doors. Gone was the carefully cultivated image of the unsuccessful sister. Today, I would finally be myself. Is everything ready? Michael nodded, handing me a leather portfolio. Contracts are prepared, security is in position, and the board members are all present. Also, he smirked, I had the photographer position themselves for the best angle of their faces when you walk in. The main conference room of Shadow Valley Partners was designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the massive oak table could seat 50. Currently, it held the entire Winters International board, their legal team, and of course, my family. I watched through the one-way glass as Marcus paced the room, checking his watch every 30 seconds. My father sat at one end of the table, attempting to maintain his dignified CEO emeritus pose but clearly annoyed. My mother was there too, probably invited to witness Marcus's moment of triumph. "Where is this mysterious CEO?" Marcus demanded, his voice carrying through the glass. "Don't they know who I am? I'm the CEO of Winters International." "8 times now," Michael whispered. I took a deep breath. Let's not keep them waiting any longer. The double doors opened and I walked in. The reaction was immediate. Marcus froze mid-stride. My father's carefully maintained composure cracked. My mother's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, spilling across the mahogany table. "Olivia," Marcus sputtered. "What? What are you doing here? This is a private meeting. Security." I walked calmly to the head of the table. "Security won't be coming, Marcus. They work for me. Everyone in this building works for me." "What is this nonsense?" my father demanded, standing up. "We're here to meet with the CEO of Shadow Valley Partners about the Tech Solutions merger." "You are meeting with the CEO," I replied, sitting down and opening my portfolio. "I'm Anna Winters, founder and CEO of Shadow Valley Partners. Though most people know us through our various subsidiaries, like Tech Solutions." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus's face had gone from red to white to an interesting shade of gray. My mother was frantically looking between me and my father, waiting for someone to explain that this was all a joke. "This is impossible," Marcus finally managed. You work out of that tiny office downtown. You're barely making ends meet. You're a carefully crafted image." I cut him off. "That small office, it's one of hundreds of properties I own. While you were busy mocking my little investment company, I was building an empire. Shadow Valley Partners controls interests in over 200 companies worldwide, including, as of last year, a majority stake in Winters International." My father found his voice. "You're lying. I would know if someone had acquired that many shares." I nodded to Michael, who began distributing folders. Shell companies, blind trusts, offshore accounts, all perfectly legal, just well hidden. "You taught me the importance of controlling information, Dad. Remember? Or was that lesson only meant for Marcus?" The board members were flipping through the documents, their expressions shifting from skepticism to shock to something approaching fear. "The numbers don't lie, and these numbers told a very clear story. Shadow Valley Partners, my company, owned 57% of Winters International. But the merger," Marcus stammered. "Tech Solutions agreed to sell to us." "Tech Solutions agreed to sell to Winters International." I corrected him, "because I ordered them to. I've owned Tech Solutions for 3 years. This entire merger was orchestrated by me." My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Why, Olivia? Why go to all this trouble?" I leaned forward, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "Because 15 years ago, you decided I wasn't worth investing in. You offered me a position as Marcus's assistant, claiming it was for my own good. You said I didn't have what it takes to succeed on my own. So I set out to prove you wrong. And now," my father asked quietly, "now things are going to change." I pulled out the final contract. "Marcus, you're right. This merger is going through, but not the way you planned. Tech Solutions will acquire Winters International, not the other way around. The company will be restructured under Shadow Valley Partners management." Marcus jumped up. "You can't do this. I'm the CEO." "A position that requires board approval," I reminded him. "And since I control the majority of shares." I let the implication hang in the air. The next hour was a blur of signatures, legal requirements, and shocked silences. Marcus was removed as CEO to be replaced by someone of my choosing. My father would retain a position on the board, but without his previous executive powers. The company name would remain Winters International. I wasn't completely heartless. As the board members filed out, leaving just my family, Marcus slumped in his chair. "All this time, you were playing us." "No, Marcus, I was building something. Something bigger than you could imagine while you were busy taking credit for other people's work." I stood up, smoothing my suit. "By the way, I still have that Mickey Mantle card. I bought it at auction last year for considerably more than you sold it for." My mother reached for my hand. "Darling, surely we can work something out. We're family." I gently pulled away. "Yes, we are. And that's why I'm not dismantling the company or firing everyone. But things will be different now. Success isn't just about wearing the right clothes or having the right title. It's about creating real value, something I learned on my own, no thanks to any of you. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Marcus, about that coffee run. I take mine black, 2 sugars. You can bring it to my office tomorrow morning. The big one, top floor. The next few months transformed Winters International. Under Shadow Valley Partners' leadership, the company expanded into new markets, developed cutting-edge technologies, and doubled its market value. I appointed competent executives based on merit rather than family connections. Marcus eventually found a position at another firm, hopefully having learned the value of humility. My parents took longer to adjust to the new reality, but gradually our relationships began to heal. Not because of my success, but because they finally saw me, really saw me, for the first time. These days, when people ask about my path to success, I tell them the truth. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one you should watch most carefully. And sometimes the best revenge isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right. As for that small downtown office, I kept it as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving. After all, success doesn't always wear a designer label. Sometimes it sits quietly in the corner, building an empire while no one's watching. The mahogany boardroom table gleamed under soft lighting as I refilled water glasses and arranged notepads with practiced efficiency. Another quarterly board meeting at Maxwell Industries, where I played the role of executive secretary for the past 18 months. If only they knew. Coffee, black, 2 sugars. James Maxwell barked without looking up from his phone. At 45, he ran his father's company the same way he probably ordered around his household staff, with casual arrogance and zero awareness. Right away, Mr. Maxwell, I replied, keeping my voice professionally neutral. My name is Victoria Chin, though they all called me Miss Walker, the name I'd used to get this position. To them, I was just another secretary, invisible except when they needed something. They had no idea I owned 51% of their company. The other board members filed in, all expensive suits and self-importance. I knew each of their names, backgrounds, and dirty little secrets. I'd spent 2 years studying them before implementing my plan. Everyone settled? I asked, setting down James's coffee. The quarterly reports are at your places. Bradley Thompson, head of finance, barely glanced at me. We'll need the usual confidentiality agreements before we begin. Already done, sir. I'd signed more NDAs than I could count, none under my real name. The irony was delicious. I took my usual seat in the corner, laptop ready to take minutes. This particular board meeting would be one to remember, but not for the reasons they expected. First quarter results are disappointing, James began, frowning at the spreadsheets. Revenues down 12% from projections. The Asian market's softer than expected, Bradley offered, and the new product line isn't performing. I bit my tongue, but not hard enough. Perhaps if we considered the cultural preferences study for marketing. The silence was immediate and crushing. Secretaries didn't offer opinions at board meetings. That wasn't our place. I'm sorry, James's voice dripped condescension. Did the secretary just try to give business advice? Charles Wilson, the oldest board member, chuckled. Careful there, Miss Walker. Don't strain yourself thinking about things beyond your expertise. Heat crept up my neck, but not from embarrassment, from anger. The same anger that had driven me to spend 5 years building my own technology company, then using its profits to quietly buy up Maxwell Industries stock through a maze of shell corporations. The same anger that had led me to take this job to watch from the inside as they ran my investment into the ground. My apologies, I murmured, returning to my notes. Let them laugh. Tomorrow everything would change. The meeting dragged on, a parade of missed opportunities and poor decisions. They dismissed marketing's warnings about the product line, ignored R&D's suggestions for innovation, brushed aside HR's concerns about talent retention. I documented every mistake, every dismissal, every example of their arrogance, not in the official minutes, but in my private notes. Evidence I'd use later. One last item, James announced. The Sherman contract. My fingers paused over the keyboard. The Sherman contract, a $100 million deal that would either save or sink the company, depending on how it was handled. Tom's team has the proposal ready, Bradley said. Standard terms, aggressive pricing. We'll undercut the competition and lock them in for 5 years. I couldn't stay quiet. Not about this, sir, if I may. James slammed his hand on the table. Enough. What could you possibly know about the Sherman contract? Only that Sherman Industries specifically requested sustainability commitments in their RFP, I said quietly, and that their CEO has publicly stated they won't sign long-term contracts without environmental compliance guarantees. And how exactly would you know that? Bradley sneered. It was in their press release last month, and in the private conversations I'd had with their board. But they didn't need to know that part. Press release or not, James cut in, you're not paid to analyze contracts. You're paid to take notes and get coffee. So please, stick to what you're qualified for. The other board members nodded in agreement. In their minds, I was just an uppity secretary who needed to be put in her place. If they'd bothered to really look into Miss Walker, they might have discovered that I held degrees from MIT and Stanford, that I'd built and sold 2 tech companies before I turned 30, that I'd been featured in Forbes 40 Under 40. But they'd never looked, never questioned. A young Asian woman applying for a secretarial position didn't trigger any alarms. Their mistake. Of course, sir, I said, returning to my notes. My apologies for overstepping. The meeting ended with a series of self-congratulatory remarks about their brilliant strategy. As they filed out, James paused by my desk. Miss Walker, he said, his tone patronizing, I know you're trying to be helpful, but please remember your place. We can easily find another secretary who understands professional boundaries. I smiled, thinking of the registered letter being delivered to the company's legal department at that very moment. Yes, Mr. Maxwell. I understand completely. After they left, I sat alone in the boardroom, looking at the empty chairs where tomorrow's drama would unfold. The letter would be on James's desk by morning. Official notification that Victoria Chen, majority shareholder of Maxwell Industries, was calling an emergency board meeting. They'd spend tonight scrambling to figure out who Victoria Chen was, how she'd acquired controlling interest in their company, and what she wanted. They wouldn't find much. I'd been very careful about keeping my real identity private. They'd have to wait until tomorrow to meet the actual owner of Maxwell Industries. I gathered my things, straightened the chairs, and turned off the lights. One last day of playing secretary. One last day of being underestimated and dismissed. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer, documents delivered. Everything's ready for tomorrow. Perfect. I took one last look at the boardroom where I'd endured 18 months of condescension and discrimination. Tomorrow, these same chairs would host a very different kind of meeting. Tomorrow they'd learn that the secretary they dismissed owned 51% of their company. Tomorrow they'd understand exactly how badly they'd underestimated me. But tonight, I had one more pot of coffee to make, one more set of notes to file, one more day of invisible work to complete. After all, a good secretary always finishes her tasks before moving on to bigger things. I arrived early the next morning, dressed not in my usual conservative secretary attire, but in a perfectly tailored Armani suit. The security guard did a double take but said nothing as I swiped my badge. The office was already buzzing with tension. Legal teams huddled in corners, whispering urgently. Board members rushed between offices, their faces tight with concern. Nobody noticed that their secretary was dressed differently. Nobody noticed me at all. Right on schedule, James burst out of his office, waving a document. Find out everything you can about Victoria Chen, he shouted at his assistant. I want to know who she is, where she came from, and how the hell she got control of my company. I smiled, organizing papers for the emergency board meeting. They'd spent all night searching, finding only what I wanted them to find, a successful tech entrepreneur who quietly amassed Maxwell Industries stock through various investment vehicles over the past 3 years. What they hadn't found was the connection between Victoria Chen and their unassuming secretary, Miss Walker. At 9 a.m. sharp, the board members filed into the conference room. Their usual swagger was gone, replaced by barely concealed panic. Coffee, Mr. Maxwell? I asked sweetly. He waved me away, absorbed in his phone. Not now. We're waiting for someone important. Yes, I said, checking my watch. You are. The room fell silent as I walked not to my usual corner, but to the head of the table. I placed my laptop down and opened it, displaying the presentation I'd prepared. What are you doing? Bradley demanded. This is a private meeting. I smiled, removing my glasses, the plain ones I'd worn as part of my disguise. I know. I called it. James stood up, his face reddening. Miss Walker, you need to leave. Now, this meeting is for. My name, I cut him off, is Victoria Chen, and I own 51% of Maxwell Industries. The silence that followed was absolute. I could almost hear their brains short-circuiting as they tried to process this information. That's impossible, Charles Wilson sputtered. Victoria Chen is. Standing right in front of you, I finished. For the past 18 months, I've watched you run my investment into the ground. I've documented every mistake, every missed opportunity, every instance of mismanagement. I clicked to the first slide of my presentation. Their faces drained of color as they saw their own words quoted back at them, alongside graphs showing the company's declining performance. The Sherman contract? I continued. They're not signing it. I met with their CEO last week. They're going with our competitor, the one that actually read their sustainability requirements. James found his voice. This is some kind of trick. You're just a secretary. No, James, I'm the majority shareholder who's been watching you destroy this company's value through sheer arrogance. I turned to my laptop and pressed enter, and I'm not done. The screens around the room came to life, displaying live video feeds of offices around the world. In each one, security teams were escorting executives from their offices. What is this? Bradley's voice shook. A corporate restructuring, I replied calmly. As of 9 a.m., the entire senior management team is being replaced. Their termination papers are being delivered now. Your copies are in front of you. They stared at the manila envelopes I'd placed at their seats earlier, when they still thought I was just the secretary bringing them their morning papers. You can't do this, James whispered, but there was no conviction in his voice. I can and I am. Check with legal if he'd like. Everything is perfectly legitimate. I smiled. I made sure all the paperwork was filed correctly. After all, that's what a good secretary does, right? Charles Wilson opened his envelope with trembling hands. The severance terms are generous, I finished. More generous than you deserve, given your performance. Sign now, and you can leave with dignity. Make a scene, and I release the documentation of your various indiscretions to the press. One by one, they signed. One by one, they stood on shaky legs and walked out of the room they'd dominated for so long. James was the last to sign. He paused at the door, turning back to me. How? He asked. How did you hide in plain sight for so long? You made it easy, I replied. You were so convinced of your own superiority that you never really looked at me. Never wondered why a secretary took such detailed notes about market trends. Never questioned why she understood complex contracts and financial statements. Because you were just the help, he said quietly, finally understanding. Exactly. Your prejudice was my perfect disguise. I stood up, straightening papers out of habit. Goodbye, James. Try not to underestimate the next secretary you work for, assuming anyone hires you after this. After the boardroom emptied, my phone buzzed with messages. The restructuring was proceeding smoothly worldwide. Stock prices were already rising as news of the management changes spread. My new executive team, handpicked over the past year, would arrive tomorrow. But today, I had one last thing to do. I walked to the office kitchen where I'd made countless cups of coffee. Sandra, one of the janitors, was there emptying trash bins. Miss Walker, she smiled. I guess I should call you Ms. Chen now. Victoria is fine, I said, pulling an envelope from my bag. I have something for you. Inside was a promotion letter. Head of Facilities Management, reporting directly to me. But I'm just a janitor, she stammered. No, I corrected her. You're someone who knows this building and its people better than anyone. Someone who works hard without recognition. Someone who deserves a chance to prove herself. Tears filled her eyes as she read the letter. Thank you. Thank you so much. Just promise me one thing, I said, heading for the door. When you're hiring your own team, don't ever use the word just. There's no such thing as just a janitor or just a secretary. Today proved that. I spent the rest of the day in my new office, James' old one, beginning the work of rebuilding Maxwell Industries. The view was different from up here, but I found myself missing my old desk's vantage point. You see things differently from the bottom. Important things that people at the top often miss. That evening, as I was leaving, I passed my old desk. A young woman was sitting there, one of the temporary staff hired to help with the transition. "Excuse me," she said timidly. "I'm not sure how to work this coffee maker." I smiled, remembering my first day here. "Let me show you. I've had some practice." Because sometimes the most powerful person in the room isn't the one at the head of the table. Sometimes she's the quiet one in a corner, taking notes, watching, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal that she's been in charge all along. The next morning's Wall Street Journal headline read, "Maxwell Industries Shocker. Secretary revealed as majority owner, ousts entire board." But the real shock wasn't that I'd bought the company. It was that I'd shown them exactly who I was, day after day, and they'd been too blind to see it. Their prejudice had been my greatest weapon, their arrogance my perfect cover, and now their company was mine. I still remember the day I first saw Cedar Grove Manor. I was 12 years old, riding my bike past the old Victorian mansion on Hampton Hill. Even then, with its peeling paint and overgrown gardens, I knew it was special. Every Sunday afternoon, I'd stop at its rusty gates, imagining how beautiful it could be if someone just gave it a chance. 20 years later, I finally had that chance. After a decade of hard work as an architectural historian and careful saving, I had enough for a down payment. When Cedar Grove went up for sale, I was the first to make an offer. "It's a money pit," my sister Madeline said over dinner at our parents' house. "You're crazy to want that old wreck." I tried to explain my vision. "The original woodwork is intact. The foundation is solid. Yes, it needs work, but—" "What Madeline means," Mom interrupted, "is that it's not a suitable home for someone in your position. You're single, no children. What do you need all that space for?" Dad nodded in agreement. "It's not practical, Alice. Let someone with a family buy it." Someone like Madeline, they meant. My perfect sister with her perfect husband and 2.5 perfect children. The daughter could follow Dad into law instead of wasting time studying old buildings like me. But I stood firm. My offer was accepted, and I spent every free moment planning the restoration. Every original feature would be preserved, every modern update carefully integrated to maintain the house's historic character. Then came the call that changed everything. "We need to discuss the house," Dad said, his lawyer voice in full effect. "Come over tonight." I arrived to find Madeline already there, sitting in her usual place at the family dinner table. The smile on her face sent warning signals through my mind. "There's been a development," Dad began. "The current owners of Cedar Grove, they're old clients of mine. We've come to an arrangement that benefits everyone." My stomach dropped. "What kind of arrangement?" "Well," Mom beamed, "since Madeline and Jack need more space with a new baby coming and you're still single, we're buying the house," Madeline announced. "Dad worked it out. Isn't it perfect? The kids will have so much room to play." I stared at them, unable to process what I was hearing. But my offer was accepted. "I have a contract." "Had a contract," Dad corrected. "I spoke with George Thompson. He owns the property. Explained the situation. He agreed to void your contract and sell to us instead." To Madeline, I said numbly, "Same thing, dear." Mom smiled. "We're family after all." But it wasn't the same thing, not even close. I spent months planning the restoration. I protested. "I've researched the history, consulted with preservationists." "Oh, we won't be keeping all that old stuff." Madeline waved her hand dismissively. "Jack's already talked to contractors about modernizing. Open concept, you know. Those old walls have to go." Each word felt like a physical blow. They were going to destroy everything that made Cedar Grove special, everything I had dreamed of preserving. "You can't," I whispered. "Actually," Dad cleared his throat, "we can. The sale's already gone through. Madeline and Jack are the new owners." I looked at him sharply. "That fast?" "How?" "We expedited things," he said smoothly, "given the circumstances." Something in his tone made me pause. Dad was using his courtroom voice, the one that always hid something. "What circumstances?" "Well," Mom jumped in, "Madeline needs the space more than you do. She has a family to think about. And since you're doing so well in your career," the pause before career spoke volumes about her opinion of my profession. "So you just took it? Just like that?" "Don't be dramatic," Madeline sighed. "We didn't take anything. We bought it fairly." "For how much?" The silence that followed was deafening. "That's not important," Dad said finally. How much? Madeline examined her manicure. $1. The room spun. $1. You bought my dream home for $1. It's a common practice, Dad began, but I cut him off. Common practice? To void my legitimate contract and sell a historic property worth millions for $1. The exact terms are complicated, he said stiffly. There were other considerations. Like what? That's privileged information between myself and my client. I stood up so quickly my chair fell backward. Your client? You mean you represented both sides of this transaction? Isn't that a conflict of interest? Sit down, Alice, Mom snapped. You're making a scene. But I was done sitting down. Done being the good daughter who accepted their decisions without question. You know what the worst part is? I said quietly, not that you took my dream away. Not even that you gave it to Madeline for nothing. It's that you really believe you did nothing wrong. We did what was best for the family, Dad insisted. No, I corrected him. You did what was best for your favorite daughter. Like always. I walked out of their house that night and didn't look back. Let them have their family dinners without me. Let them congratulate themselves on how cleverly they'd managed everything. But something nagged at me. The speed of the transaction, Dad's careful evasions about the other considerations. The fact that George Thompson, who'd been so enthusiastic about my restoration plans, had suddenly changed his mind. It took 3 months of research and calling in every professional favor I had, but I finally found what they tried to hide. The truth about Cedar Grove Manor, and why they'd been so desperate to get it for Madeline before anyone else could look too closely. My phone rang as I sat in my apartment, surrounded by property records and historical documents. It was my friend Lisa at the county records office. You were right, she said without preamble. There's something very wrong with that sale, and it goes back a lot further than your sister's purchase. I looked at the papers spread across my desk, decades of ownership records, building permits, and something else. Something that would change everything. How bad? I asked. Bad enough that when this comes out, your father could be disbarred. And that's just the beginning. I smiled, thinking of Madeline's smug face as she announced her ownership of my dream home, of Dad's careful legal maneuvering, of Mom's dismissal of my dramatic reaction. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd put me in my place once and for all. But they didn't know what I discovered. They didn't know that Cedar Grove Manor held secrets worth far more than its architectural heritage. And they certainly didn't know that their perfect $1 deal was about to become the most expensive mistake they ever made. 3 weeks after my discovery, I sat in the office of District Attorney Helen Martinez, watching her face as she reviewed the documents I'd gathered. She paused, shaking her head. This is unprecedented. Are you sure about these findings? I nodded, opening another folder. The original land grant from 1872, the trust documents from 1923, the preservation covenant from 1955. And here, I pulled out the key document, the Federal Historic Site designation that was mysteriously lost in 1985. When your father became George Thompson's attorney, Helen finished. Exactly. They've been hiding this for decades. Every sale, every transfer of Cedar Grove Manor has been illegal since then. The truth had been buried in layers of legal paperwork and conveniently missing documents. Cedar Grove wasn't just a historic house. It was a federally protected landmark. More importantly, it was held in perpetual trust for the preservation of its architectural and historical significance. No one could actually own it. No one could modify it. And certainly no one could sell it for $1 to tear out its historic features. Your father, Helen said carefully, as Mr. Thompson's attorney, would have known all this. Oh, he knew. That's why they rushed Madeline's purchase through before I could dig too deeply. My restoration plans would have drawn attention from preservation societies. Questions would have been asked. Instead, they sold it to your sister, who planned to modernize it, effectively destroying the evidence of its historic status in the process. I smiled grimly, except they didn't count on me being quite so good at my job. Architectural historian, remember, the one they all dismissed as having a useless career? Helen gathered the documents carefully. We'll need statements, witnesses. This goes beyond just your family. There's decades of fraud here, involving multiple parties. I have everything you need, I assured her, including emails between my father and George Thompson discussing how to keep the property's true status hidden. How did you get those? Let's just say Mr. Thompson's grandson owes me a favor. He wasn't happy to learn his grandfather had been lying to him about his inheritance rights for 30 years. The next morning, as I was reviewing more documents in my apartment, my phone exploded with notifications. The story had broken. Historic CDR Garov Manor Center of FRADD investigation. Local ATJORNUI IC's disbarment over decades-long PROPR2I CEGME. Federal authorities seize illegally sold historic landmark. Then came the calls. First, Madeline, hysterical. They're making us move out. They've frozen our accounts. What's happening? Then Mom, alternating between tears and threats. What have you done? Your own family? Finally Dad, his lawyer voice cracking. Alice, we need to talk. Whatever you think you know. I let them all go to voicemail. Instead, I drove to Cedar Grove, parking across the street to watch the chaos unfold. Federal agents swarmed the property. Preservation experts documented every illegal modification. Journalists gathered at the gates, cameras flashing. A familiar figure stormed out the front door. Madeline, designer handbag clutched like a shield, mascara running. You can't do this, she screamed at the federal marshals. We own this house. We paid for it. You paid $1, I said, finally stepping forward. For a property that was never for sale in the first place. She spun toward me, face contorted with rage. You did this. No, Madeline, you all did this. You and Dad and George Thompson. 40 years of fraud, all because you couldn't stand the idea of playing by the rules. It's just an old house. It's a federally protected landmark held in perpetual trust for historical preservation, something Dad knew perfectly well when he helped George Thompson start falsifying documents in 1985. Your father, a new voice interrupted, has bigger problems than real estate fraud at the moment. Helen Martinez approached, flanked by federal agents. We've just executed a search warrant at his office. The Cedar Grove documents were just the beginning. Care to guess what else we found? I could guess. Dad's careful arrangements for special clients hadn't started or ended with Cedar Grove. You've destroyed this family, Madeline spat. No, I corrected her. I exposed the truth. There's a difference. Later that evening, as the sun set behind Cedar Grove's distinctive turrets, I stood in what would have been my library. The room was half demolished, Madeline's modernization arrested mid-destruction. Miss Harrison. A preservation expert approached, carrying blueprints. We found your restoration plans in the county archives. The trust board is very impressed. They'd like to talk to you about overseeing the rehabilitation. I touched the original walnut paneling, still perfect under decades of neglect. What about my father's legal issues? That's out of our hands, but given your role in exposing the fraud and your obvious commitment to historic preservation. I smiled. When do we start? Over the next year, Cedar Grove transformed. Not into Madeline's modernized showpiece, but into the carefully restored historic landmark it was always meant to be. Every detail I dreamed of preserving was brought back to life. Dad was disbarred, his other arrangements for special clients coming to light one by one. Madeline and Jack, their assets frozen pending investigation, moved in with Mom. George Thompson faced federal charges. And me? I was appointed permanent curator of Cedar Grove Manor, living in the caretaker's cottage and overseeing its preservation for future generations. Was it worth it? Lissa asked one evening as we sat in the restored garden. Going up against your whole family? I looked at the house, glowing in the sunset. Every window restored, every architectural detail preserved. Inside, tourists and history students explored rooms that told stories spanning centuries. They thought they were punishing me, I said finally, selling my dream house to Madeline for $1. But they never understood what made it valuable in the first place. The historical significance. That too, but mainly the truth. Cedar Grove's truth had been buried under decades of lies, just waiting for someone to care enough to dig it up. My phone buzzed, another message from Mom, probably. They still tried to contact me sometimes when they needed money or wanted to explain. I'd stop listening to the explanations. You know what the best revenge is? I asked Lisa. What's that? I smiled, watching a group of architecture students sketching Cedar Grove's distinctive features, living well in the house they tried to steal, knowing that their $1 deal cost them everything. The next morning, I found an envelope in my office. Inside was a single document, the original dollar bill Madeline had used to buy Cedar Grove. Across it, someone had written, "Some things are worth more than money." I pinned it to my bulletin board next to my preservation awards and the newspaper article about the fraud investigation. A reminder that sometimes justice comes not in the form of revenge, but in the simple triumph of truth over lies. They had tried to take my dream and give it to Madeline for $1. Instead, they had given me something far more valuable, the chance to protect Cedar Grove forever, ensuring that no one else could ever treat it as a mere commodity to be bought and sold. That was worth more than any dollar they could ever spend.